Hello, Mark here with the final video in this series on email writing. Once you've completed the tasks in this video, you will have attempted one of the most challenging or maybe awkward things to do by email, especially as a university student. But I hope you will see that if you follow the advice given, it's not really so difficult. Certainly nothing to fear. In this video, we are again learning by doing, and we are again traveling back in time to December 2020. The pace of the video is a little slower than the first videos in the series, and that's to give you time to think and absorb information in relation to the writing task. I hope you enjoy the video and the task. Here's a task for you. In a moment, pause the video and read the email on the screen. Imagine that this is an email I have received from a student. Is it okay? Do you see any problems with it? Pause the video now and have a think. Let's compare it to another version of the same message. Dear Mark, I'm very sorry, but I had unexpected childcare responsibilities yesterday and didn't have time to complete my assignment before the deadline. Would it be possible to get an extension? I think I can complete the assignment and submit tomorrow. Now, I hope you agree with me that the second email is better than the first. It has a better impact on me. Now, in the first email, the student was notifying me of an issue, of a problem, but it wasn't enough just to send me some information. So part 3 was all about communicating information. In part 4 we're focusing on making requests. And I think the problem with the first version of that email was it told me that there was a problem, but it didn't make a request. When I read that message, I'll go back to it now. When I read this message, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. If a student mentions a family problem, I don't feel particularly comfortable saying, what's the family problem? I don't really think it's my place to ask personal questions if a student isn't offering to tell me about them or isn't asking for advice or for help. But the student is talking about a missed deadline. So a missed deadline has a negative impact on the student's education and their assessment of their education and potentially their future as a result. So they do need some help, they do need some action. So a request is required. And I quite like this request because it does a number of things that actually university staff like to see or prefer to see in a request email. Now, a colleague of mine has done some research on this in the past. And what my colleague Joy Bao did is she collected some request emails from university students and showed them to some university staff and asked the university staff to identify which emails they felt were effective and which ones were not. So it's basically rating them, like, is that a good email or a bad email? And then once the academic members of staff had distinguished the better emails from the less effective emails, she then interviewed them to talk about what it was that made good emails effective and what it was that made the other emails less effective. And she compared this with other research that had been done around the world. And her conclusions were kind of similar to what had seen elsewhere. She was able to build up a kind of framework, which is a kind of a list of ingredients of a successful email. And her research kind of showed her which of those elements were essential and which of those elements were desirable. Okay, So I'm going to talk you through an example here. So here's an example of an effective request email. Take a look at the ingredients of this email. You can pause now if you want to read it first. But basically it starts with a good, clear subject line. It then has an appropriate greeting and name. What comes next is some background information leading to the request. Okay, so it's not just I had a family problem, but some information to let the reader know what the writer has done so far and maybe why the writer is asking for some help now. After that background information, we then have the request itself. I was wondering if you could have a look at my plan and let me know what you think. Okay. So it's a politely worded request. And by using an expression like, I was wondering if you could, you see that's quite different to being demanding and just saying, can you look at my plan? Or look at my plan. Tell me what you think of my plan. Now, I was wondering if you could. That doesn't assume that you can. So it's no imposition. We then have a note of thanks. I'd be very grateful for your help. A closing and the student's name. Okay. Now have a look at this one. So this is your task now. I'd like you to pause the video, read this email, consider the components of it. Is it successful? If so, why? And if you don't think it's successful, why not? Okay. Now, I hope you agree with me that this email could be improved. So the subject line is fine, I think, but if we consider what we've seen in previous workshops, the address is not. This should use the member of staff's first name, not Ms. Robbins. I'm one of the distance learner students in your teaching writing module. I guess that's a way of giving some background information. I would, depending on the size of that module, perhaps the teacher already knows. But yeah, I think there's clear enough context given in I'm having trouble streaming this week's video because my internet is slow. Is it possible to get downloads? So we have a clear understanding of what the student's problem is, and then we have a question that also makes it clear kind of what that student needs, and that is to be able to download the videos. There's probably a better way of asking this question, like are the videos already somewhere online where I can download them? Might be good. It might be a good way of kind of asking the question in a way that doesn't assume that the teacher is going to have to make them available. But of course, it is possible that the teacher is going to have to put them in a different place for this student. But yeah, I think needs some improvements, but otherwise is a generally great. So what I'd like to do now is just tell you a little bit more about what research tells us about request emails. If you find it difficult to write request emails, then you are not alone. Like the research tells us that many students struggle to write email requests. Certainly requests which university staff would find effective and appropriate. But I think it's really helpful for you to take on board the following findings from the research, which is that a successful email request typically has the following components. And these will be becoming quite familiar to you now. Okay, so we need a clear and appropriate subject line, an appropriate form of address. In my case, that would be Dear Mark. Background information about the request. A clear and concise request. Justification of the request, although this is optional. An expression of thanks, which again is optional. And something that's essential is an appropriate closing. Okay. Now, an issue I've spoken about already in a couple of sections of this workshop is imposition. And I've said kind of very early on, basic email etiquette, don't impose. So don't expect others to do work that you haven't bothered to do yourself. Try not to ask someone to do more work than they should normally be expected to do. But I think it's easier to understand this with a few examples. So I've got some here. As usual, you can pause and take your time over this task, but I'd just like you to have a think about how staff might feel when they receive emails including requests like these. Are they likely to want to help the writer? Please check my work. Can you give me some feedback on my draft today because the deadline is tomorrow? I missed the lecture, so can you send me the slides, please? And finally, I've applied for a job and they need a reference before I can start. Can you write one for me ASAP? In case you didn't already know, ASAP stands for as soon as possible. And in case you haven't already guessed, then all 4 of those messages are far too imposing and are not going to leave anyone with a positive impression of you. They're not likely to want to help as much as if they received a polite request. And if you're leaving someone with that impression while also asking them to write a reference for you, I suspect that reference could be better. Okay, so as with other sections of this workshop, there is a writing task for you. I think it's really important that you put lessons from these workshops into practice and apply them in your email writing as soon as possible, ASAP. So this is writing task 3. I'd like you to imagine that you are interested in reading some research into email writing at university. Okay? Imagine that, okay? Perhaps you are interested, but I want you to imagine that you are interested, and I'd like you to write an email to me requesting some suggestions for further reading. So write to me to ask for some recommendations. Address the email to me using the email address aessd@hearts.ac.uk. Remember, my name is Mark Holloway, but I think you know now how to address that email. Whatever you choose to write in your subject line, please add the letters WT3 in square brackets to the end so that I can manage my inbox and won't be overwhelmed by messages coming in. And remember, before you press send, think about everything you've learned so far about email etiquette. Okay? And then when you're ready, you press send. So that's all from me on email writing for now. As always, you can find more on the Centre for Academic English StudyNet site, as well as our social media accounts and YouTube. Look out for updates on this email writing series, including videos giving feedback on the messages I have received. If you have any requests for further videos, workshops, or anything else you would find helpful on email writing or any other subject, you know how to write an email request now, so please write to me via cae@hearts.ac.uk. Goodbye for now.